Hello, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Catechesis. I'm Father Joe Krupp, and you're not. And here's the key. I just realized that I closed out the screen that has all my notes for today, and I have no idea how to reopen them. So what I'm going to do is just maybe like turn off the computer. Hey, and guys, here's the really good news. I'm in charge of a parish or two. Yeah. There we go. Okay, the Lord likes me again. All right. Well, anyway, it's so great to see you guys. I do love Wednesdays because I get to see you. And when I say see you, I don't really mean see you because the spyware I'm using currently I'm not supposed to tell you about. What you can't see is that I have a big old screen now. I lifted some money from the collection. I'm just kidding.
That's not something to
joke about. Carrie lifted some money from the collection. No, I had gift cards. And so I bought a little monitor for $129 with a gift card.
And on your shopping excursion yesterday?
Yes, we were on a lovely shopping excursion where Detroit City Sports in, not Detroit City, but in Sterling Heights. Had an expert come in to authenticate baseballs. For those of you who aren't losers, I'll explain what it is. When you have a baseball, well, let's grab one, shall we? Should I just show them? Okay.
Yes.
So what's the one I'm most proud of? Oh, you know what? Oh, hey. This is the one I'm most proud of. So this is a baseball signed by Don Larson and Yogi Berra. Okay, now if you're not a baseball freak, you might think, this way?
Yeah, there you go.
You might think, who are they? They're not Tigers. But the reason they're significant is there's only been one perfect game in the history of the World Series. And it was thrown by Don Larson, who was pitching, and who was catching? Yogi Berra on October 1st of 1956. So I have this ball. But what I don't have is a certificate that says if this really is them, because of course people forge all the time. Forge? I don't know, they're forgeries. So what an expert does is they're appointed and trained and all this, and they use a computer program and even lasers. And it turns out this ball is authentic. So that just made its value quadruple. And I'm pretty excited about it. So, not about the quadrupling value, but just, I knew it was authentic, but I lost the certification. So, Dad and I did that yesterday with Carrie's beloved, John, and we were so blessed to get a day with him. I love that dude. And he's psychotic about baseball, which helps. What else do we do? We did a lot. Oh, I bought a little fridge with gift cards. I had a ton of gift cards, and nowhere I go will use them. Like, I'll put them in the thing and none of us know what to do. They're like, just use something else. Well, finally, at Costco or Costco, however you say that word, they were like, no, here's what you do. And this dude named Brian, who should get a medal from Costco, was like, well, no, just push this button and that button. And I had so many gift cards through the years that I literally couldn't use because nobody, now I used them. I have no idea.
You better hurry up and use them up. You probably got them for Christmas. It's almost Christmas.
Exactly. It's these vanilla cards, right? Nobody knows what to do with these. When you take them into stores, it's like, well, just put it in the thing and type in a 4-digit number and all that. No, it never works. So what this guy says is, no. He says, put them in, and when it asks for a PIN number, just push a green button, and boom.
Now you know.
And knowing's half the battle. G.I. Joe, a real American hero. Okay.
That is so true.
So anyway, here we are today, and I'm kind of excited about the topic. Now, a warning. This might take 2 shows because Carrie's totally out of control. So what did we do? Well, we had a guest scheduled for tomorrow, but knowing that it's possible I'll need 2 shows, I killed that person. And let me just say, oops. No?
Well, also not a good joke, being that the person is ill.
Who is it? Oh, do I not say?
No,
okay. Oh, and it's someone I love, isn't it?
Yes.
I love everyone. What is wrong with me? Anyway, so if this person dies, let me just say, sorry, I made a joke before you died. But I didn't kill him or her. It's a him.
Somebody's asking about the wedding. You can tell them about the wedding.
The weather?
The wedding last weekend.
Your wedding or the other one?
Our wedding.
It was beautiful. The only thing that went wrong was the priest. Kelly is Carrie's daughter, biologically. But in every sense of the word. Like, everything was thought of. Everything was perfect. Everything, I mean, it was amazing. And I have found myself so blessed to be kind of adopted by Carrie's family, including our kids. Who wants a loser priest hanging around? Well, they're nice to me. And I'm so grateful. And yeah, so they're married. I decided to go ahead and use the Roman ritual. And really wasn't that glorious. The only thing that freaked me out was the bridesmaids. Okay, so you had Kelly, Claire, and Kate, and then there was a fourth girl, young lady, and I was like, oh, she's a cousin. I mean, she looks like one of Carrie's girls. Like, not a little bit, but I was trying to figure out, well, whose daughter is she? Because I'm doing the math, and I'm like, I can't figure out, but clearly this is Kelly's cousin, who was born the same day or something. She's not even related.
Right.
It just freaks me out. Like, there was no doubt in my head. If you would have said, Joe, will you bet me I bet you $1,000 that girl's not related to Kelly, I'd be like, I don't have 1,000, and I'll bet it. Because I know where Dad's wallet is. Seriously, that freaked me out. Like, when Carrie's like, no, we're not related, I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I asked John, because I'm just sure Carrie's screwing with me, and he was like, yeah, we're not related. That's weird.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, she looks like her sister. Not a little bit. She looks more like her sister than Claire or Kate.
Yes.
Physically.
Yes.
Yeah. Is that okay to say?
Yeah.
Oh, good. All of a sudden it hit me that might somehow be rude. I never know with women. Like, half the time I can't pronounce what your tribe doesn't want me to say.
Let's see. I don't like you to talk about death.
Okay, or about your drinking? Because your drinking's going to kill you. There, I got both of them in.
There you go.
So today's topic is Lepanto, okay? And this is a big one. Now, what I did not know until just last week on Twitter is this was kind of funny. But there was a couple people who were like, oh, that wasn't a big deal. Christians, it wasn't an unwinnable battle. The Christians had better tech. And I'm like, so I researched a little more, thinking, what don't I know? And there was an article written by someone. But that always happens, right? It's just like in any company or in any gathering, there's always that one person who needs to be contrary by any rational standard. Oh, yeah, and by the way, the Europeans had some advantage in terms of technology, but they were so wildly outnumbered. And where was this marvelous tech when that army was steamrolling through all of the Mediterranean? I mean, so whatever. There will always be people who have to do that. And I find it best to check them out and then probably ignore them. But sometimes, of course, the contrary person helps. Yeah. So, well, always the contrary person helps, actually. But anyway, stop. So we're going to look at Lepanto. Why? It's huge. Why is it huge? We're going to talk about that as part of this. But to give you a sense of things, well, let's start with it. I got my notes. I'm just going to go. Yeah? Okay. So we're in 1571 is when the Battle of Lepanto took place. And I think I told you guys this. The subway exit, when you're in Rome, if you want to get to the Vatican, there's a few exits, but one of them is called Lepanto. That's how big the church thinks this is. Yeah. So what do we got? Lepanto is the last major battle in the West to be fought primarily by rowers. Right? There weren't any sails in this battle. There were dudes rowing. Okay? And being blunt, on the Christian side, they were dudes. On the Muslim side, they were slaves. Okay? It was the largest naval battle in history since Marcus Agrippa fought Cleopatra and Mark Antony at Actium. I think it was Actium, but wherever they fought him. And when did that happen? About 100 years before Christ. So it had been about 1,500 years since we'd seen a battle this big. And if you saw both of those, you're very old. Yeah, I'm good at math. The use of sails displaced rowing ships after this, but this was the last big battle in the West with rowing ships. And so here's a few things you need to know for this to make sense. First of all, how do you fight battles where you're rowing and not using wind? Through what Mike Duncan calls the subtle art form of ramming. What you do is you have on the front of your boat something sharp and heavy, and you try to slam it into the other boat. Now, you don't just want to puncture that boat, you want to be able to board it, right? Basically, a naval battle back then was hand-to-hand combat on sea. Okay, you used cannons and all this to loosen them up and to get their ship stopped, and then you rammed into their boat and jumped on it, and everybody starts killing each other. Okay, for Jesus or Allah, either way. Well, not either way. I mean, I'm kind of partial to Jesus. I work for him. He signs my checks. These were violent, awful, bloody battles. And you have to remember, that we always see these neat people in uniforms and, oh God, no, this was just savagery. And armor was sporadic. Weapons, well, it's not like there was a central government to issue weapons. You had your weapon. Could be an axe, could be a pike, could be a sword. And although everybody in movies uses swords, people back then tended to use axes. They did a lot more damage, and nobody really was that. Well, anyway, I'm going on and on. What else do you need to know? Christian Europe was the farthest thing from united at this point. The Muslim armies, the Ottomans, were on the same page. They had one ruler, and they were moving right along in the same direction. Europe was a fragmented mess. They were usually fighting each other or kind of needling each other, poking at each other. And there was genuine hate, I think is fair to say, and certainly distrust between the European empires. So try not to think of the Christian armies as this monolith. That's how the Muslim armies were. The Christians were fragmented, and part of the reason that the Ottomans had so much success in fighting the Europeans at this point is because nobody was on the same page. And even Venice, who we're going to hear a lot about today, sometimes sided with the Muslims because they were great trading partners. No, Venice. Venice was the key to Europe. In fact, this is interesting. This last week, I've been listening to Patrick Wyman's Tides of History podcast, and he has one episode, it's about an hour long, on Venice, and it is very worth your time. Patrick Wyman, Tides of History, The Rise of Venice, I believe is the name of the episode. And I re-listened to it to help me get ready for this. But Venice was really the key to Europe. Wealthy beyond what you can fathom. They were powerful traders and sailors. Venice would have been considered the gateway to Europe to the Ottomans, and rightly so. You got to look geographically at where Venice is in Italy to get a sense of this. But they were the bridge between what they back then said the East and the West. What was the East? Everything this side of the Bosphorus, and everything this side was the West. So more than likely, if you're an American listening to this, you have, again, somewhat likely, greater than 60% chance you would be West. People we would call Persians or Kurds or Armenians or Greeks, that's all East. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, Venice was the gateway to the West, and it was the best of everything about the West and the worst. Now let's look at the Ottomans. Okay, the Ottomans were this massive force of united Islam, and they had a leader who was called a caliph. And every new caliph was expected to expand the empire. And why? Two reasons. To fulfill Islam's mission. right? Remember, Islam means submission. It means submit. And you submit to Islam. You convert or you die. Or if you're a Christian or a Jew, you don't have to convert or die. You can live under the yoke of Islam and pay a tax and blah, blah, blah. So the other thing it did for this caliph was keep people happy. As long as you're conquering, you have slaves. As long as you have slaves in a slave economy, right, besides the obvious moral weaknesses of a slave economy, one of the technical weaknesses is you can never run out of slaves, right? And slaves don't procreate well, as you can imagine. A man and a woman aren't going to be eager to have a child that will be born and live a life of a slave. So one of the troubles, beyond all the morals, I hope I don't have to get into that too much, is that when you have a slave economy, you need more slaves, always, because slaves die and they don't procreate very well. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, so the caliph had to fulfill the mission of Islam and make the whole world Muslim, and he had to keep his folk happy and keep bringing in slaves. The Christians didn't really have a goal because they weren't one. They all had different goals, and part of their goal was to screw over that Christian over there. Yeah? So that's I think, some of the things you need to know. How are people doing so far?
Good.
Yeah? Everybody happy?
Yep.
Well, the dead people aren't. Carrie doesn't want me making more dead jokes, Dad. I think I'm killing it.
Okay, that kind of joke is okay. It's when you talk about you dying.
Me dying? Well, it's going to happen.
Well,
So let's look at this. Basically, what you need to know is the Muslims, the Ottomans, were steamrolling through the East. Nobody could stand up to them. They outnumbered everyone. They were fabulously wealthy beyond what you can imagine. And, again, when they conquered, depending on, okay, I'm going to be blunt. In the politically correct day and age, we're supposed to bring up the fact that they offered Christians a chance to submit to Islam. There is nothing written during this time where the Muslims actually did that. Okay, this was about conquering, getting slaves or Muslims. You get me? There is that I could find, and I've read a few people who said they really didn't obey the law, right? That the Muslim law was you have to offer your defeated enemies a chance to convert. I didn't do that. And also, Muhammad forbade, that I know of, if a Christian or a Jew doesn't want to convert, they don't have to, but they do have to pay a tax and submit. It doesn't appear the Ottomans at this point in history obeyed that, okay? Now, the Pope at the time, Pius V, saw this coming, right? Reports were coming in from all over of, we're in trouble, right? This is a monstrous army in size. And they have no qualm just steamrolling. And they want the world to be Muslim. What did he do with that information? Well, for one thing, he undertook vigorous diplomacy to try to get all these fragmented Christian empires on the same page, and it really didn't work. No matter what he did, ultimately the kings and queens or the doges or whatever really weren't interested in unity. They were, because why? They don't trust each other. Well, don't get into that. So what he began, and this is where our mother comes in, Pius really begged God's people to pray the rosary and ask our mother to pray for the unity of Europe. And not even really a political unity, but more just at least one military unity. We have to put up a fight here. Not one of Europe's powers could have stood against the Ottomans alone. And this is where, for Catholics, we call this Our Lady of the Rosary, the feast where we celebrate this, or we used to call it Our Lady of Victory. And I think we changed it because we're sissies. But yeah, the intercession of our mother did bring a miracle here that we're going to see in a bit. Could Christians pretend to convert and leave, or did they keep them and make sure they followed Muslim ways? It depends where. You have a number of Jews and Christians doing the, yeah, sure, we love Allah, whatever, and to be a Muslim, at that point, they would have had to declare something like, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the last great prophet. I think I'm saying it right, but don't quote me. And then there are the pillars of Islam, right? Charity to the poor, the Hajj, all these kinds of things, praying all these days. So, yeah, I'm sure, because Christians did the same things to Jews way before this. Yeah. Oops. So Pius saw the looming threat, and he tried to unite them under a holy league, an official partnership where they agreed to put aside their differences and fight together against a common enemy, and perhaps most importantly, to not exploit. Right? So, because this would have been so Christian Europe. If somebody steamrolled Venice, well, then Genoa wouldn't come help them. They'd wait till they were down and then go, I can kick. Do you need someone to kick your corpse? I can do that, right? That's just how they were. It's hard to explain, but you're talking hundreds of years of fighting each other. So he just didn't have any luck. And then something happened, okay? On August 1st of 1571. How are people doing so far? Okay. I saw another question. Cervantes. I see someone put, yeah, he's going to come up in a minute. Okay, anyway. Where are we? Okay. So there's a historian named, have I been quoting my historians? I don't think I have I? I'm so sorry. Okay, some of my sources, holy crap, you guys, I'm so sorry, is History Today. I read a fine series of articles in History Today about this. Praise God. Okay, because I didn't quote anybody yet. Okay. I just freaked out because I tried to do that. Okay. Now, Carrie, I provided a link on my show notes. Do you see that? This is a historian named Michael Novak breaking this down. And if you want, he gives grisly detail. I'm not gonna. So if you want, Carrot's going to put up a link that you can click after the show. He writes in a very florid fashion. I like it. He's telling you a story, right? He's giving you personalities and great details of torture. Thanks. We really appreciate it, Michael. But he's my primary source for what I'm about to describe, which is the thing that's going to get us to Lepanto. Okay? Namely, do you remember how when we started this, I told you a caliph has to expand their territory? Do you remember that? It was because of that in the spring of 1571, a huge Muslim fleet set out under a guy named Ali Pasha. Okay, and what was he set out to do? To take control of the Mediterranean, all the way up to Venice. Why? That's where all the trading is. Okay, the Adriatic, the Mediterranean, all that area, he wanted total control of. And he basically ordered, kill everyone, take every port, we will own the Med. Okay. Now, I might be wrong on this, but if he had pulled this off, I think that they would have been the Ottomans would have been the first people to do that since Rome. Okay, Rome had total control of the Med for a while. During the summer, Ali Pasha went all through the Adriatic, hit fort after fort, and picked up tens of thousands of slaves. Okay, nicely done, Maurice. Mowed everything down. He was basically unstoppable. And when he had it almost locked down, and this is pretty clever, okay? He sent some ships to blockade the St. Mark's Square in Venice. And less about tactical, but more about to let Venice know, yeah, we're coming. We're coming. The rest of the Ottoman fleet that he didn't send there, I think it said he sent less than 20 ships. But the rest of them all hit Cyprus. And if you look at your little map and you look at Cyprus, it was awful. whatever the rules were, they got disregarded. And unbelievable, grotesque tortures and enslavements happened here. Quote, they set fire to churches, they beheaded the older women and marched the younger ones off into slavery. So even that, the Christian world still wasn't united. But remember, this whole time in the background, Pope Pius is getting these reports, and then he's sending people off, right, to Spain, to all over, just going, guys, this is real. This is real. So then the Ottomans headed north to hit the last Venetian stronghold in the Med. And this was the key, right? Because this fort was where, in a sense, Venice administrated all that was going on, the trade, everything, okay? A battle commenced where an army of 100,000 Ottomans laid siege to the fort. There were 15,000 defenders. This is not Lepanto yet, okay? Get this, in the battle, the over 180,000 cannonballs were launched at the Christian fort, in it and at it. And the defenders held out, and held out hard. And a lot of it is credited to a general named Bragadino, huh? So Bragadino, what do we know? He was old, but a brilliant commander. Venetians at this point were really kind of, in a sense, the kings of that area. Unbelievable seamen, unbelievable warriors, unbelievable traders. They ruled the world. And this Bragadino had lots of experience. And he had some, apparently, great charisma. And he held that fort. Okay, it was insane, but he held the fort. The defenders held out for weeks and weeks, and the Muslim generals were getting furious. What they expected was a short battle, right? He expected, rationally, that the Christian leaders like Bragadino would look and say, we can't win this, and surrender after a skirmish, right? You got to be able to say, I fought. No, these guys were going to fight to the death. He did not anticipate how long these Venetians would hold out. He didn't anticipate how many men he was going to lose. Because again, both sides knew the Venetians were going to lose, but they just wouldn't surrender. The two sides fought savagely. The Ottoman army lost 80,000 men, okay, in this fight. But more troops arrived every day, right? More supplies arrived every day. Gunpowder, food, the whole thing. So as far as the Ottomans were concerned, we can do this for a year. And they could, without even breaking a sweat. They had the unlimited resources of the East. The Venetians, not so much. Okay, one thing, if you know that area, you know they had a ton of cats. They ran out of food and literally ate all of the cats. Okay, so on August 1st, General Bragadino looked over the situation. What did he see? And you're gonna laugh. We're out of food. We're out of cats. Yeah. There were less than 400 men left to fight. Okay, so they lost over 14,000 men so far. Or 13,000, excuse me. So they had less than 400 dudes that could fight. They were completely out of food, and they had, what did I see? 6 barrels of gunpowder left. So the Ottomans offered really good peace terms. Okay? All right, guys, here's what we got. You surrender now, and we guarantee you safe passage to go home to Venice. All the citizens and all the soldiers, just get on your boats and go. And we'll protect you on the way to Venice. That was something people did back then. So Bragadino accepted. Okay, this is an honorable. This is what you would do for an opponent who fought hard and honorably, right? Is say to him, okay, you knew you were going to lose, you fought like heck. All right, we're going to honor you a safe passage home, guaranteed. So Alpha Mustafa, who was the leader of the forces, met with Bragadino, and Mustafa ordered the execution of all the soldiers. He ordered that while Bragadino watched, their heads are cut off and their heads were piled up in front of him. Okay. He then ordered Bragadino's ears and nose chopped off, and he made him crawl like a dog on the ground. They tortured him for hours. Bragadino finally died while he was being flayed. Okay. So they stuffed his corpse with straw. They raised it up on the mast and kind of went around from port to port showing his corpse. And then they sent it on to their capital. Yikes. Okay. All the non-soldiers, 15,000 to 20,000, were enslaved. So this news, as you can imagine, holy cow. Okay, they're coming. And if the Venetians couldn't stop them, what can we do? And they're not going to accept surrender. And that brought the Holy League together. Pope Pius worked really hard, and God's people prayed their tails off. And these leaders finally agreed, all right, we'll unite-ish. The League united under the leadership of, no kidding, Don Juan. That was his name. He was the bastard son of King Philip. So, how are we doing? Any questions so far? Let me look. How are people doing?
Good.
Okay. Is it true that, I don't know. Okay, was this battle? Oh, the Lepanto battle? Yeah, we're going to see it wasn't that long. We haven't got to Lepanto yet. Isn't this crazy? This is all just to get us to Lepanto. What did it? What compelled the Christians to actually work together? You heard, right? That's why I had to tell you that story. Tens of thousands of Christians being taken hostage, an army that surrendered and agreed to peaceable terms, tortured and their body paraded around. And by the way, Christians, don't get uppity. I mean, we did this crap all the time. Yeah, this was how things were back then. The surrender thing, that is a big deal. That's something that if a Christian did it, the other Christian kings would have killed them. But still, I don't want it to be Muslims are all evil and bad and Christians are all good. I don't want any of that. Venetians, this was a cutthroat society, okay? So where were we? I lost my spot. I lost me spot. Oh, there it is. Okay. So the groundwork that the Pope had been laying for years finally came together. The League united under Don Juan. And you got to remember, Venice was not excited to fight the Muslims, right? Before this big battle, why? Muslims were their big trading power. That's how Venice got rich. The Muslims liked the Venetians liked the Muslims. It's just the Venetians weren't willing to share the Mediterranean with the Muslims. Well, no, they were. Well, I'm just going to say it. The Ottomans wanted the Med. And the Venetians were like, yeah, not going to happen. We'll fight. But it was really important that the Venetians got on board, okay? In that day, they were the masters of shipbuilding, and they were the gunnery capital of the world, producing the most innovative, this is how, what's his name says it, quote, the most innovative, versatile, stoutest, and seaworthy vessels in the world. The best sea captains in the world were from Venice and Genoa, and Venice got a little fired up about this. The taking of that fort and all the dishonor that followed, that really, what do you say, it woke the bear, okay? Genoa too. And Genoa and Venice hated each other. You can't imagine the level of hate. Like Venice and Genoa were they were similar in this. they had similar things. They were in a swampy area right off the ocean, and they manipulated it to build on it, right? They were master seamen and fighters. But here's the key. Venice was organized. Genoa wasn't, right? Genoa was the sort where leaders were assassinated all the time. Venice, there was never assassinations at this point. They had a system that worked. And those kind of opposites reflected the cultures. Right. Genoa was rich and powerful, but they were so unorganized and so divided within themselves that they really hadn't been a threat to Venice in some time. But one thing they would have never done is unite with the Venetians, but they did. Genoa contributed a fleet under their Admiral Doria, I don't know how to say his name, but he was considered probably the greatest of all the military leaders of the day, although he was super old, right? When he was young, he was a lion. Now, what do you say, a lion in winter, I believe is the phrase you use. But that helped. Like, if you can imagine your most honorable and capable enemy becoming your ally, like each time someone joined the Holy League, everybody got a little more like, okay, all right? When Spain jumped in and Venice and Genoa, okay now, okay, we got to fight. We got to fight. And then the key was the Knights of Malta. They were the masters. Now, there wasn't a lot of them at all. There was very few. But what do you say about Army Rangers, right? One riot, one ranger. It's the same thing. Yeah, you remember that old story about when one of the Greek city-states asked the Spartans for help, and they sent one guy, right? And they were like, no, that's enough. You know, that's very much this type of thing. The Knights of Malta offered their, quote, small but highly skilled fleet in support of the Pope, right? They loved the Pope. The Pope said, please join, so they did. How we doing?
Good.
Yeah, is this boring?
No.
Okay. So Don Juan, who was described by his contemporaries as a humble and modest man, pledged the support of Spain and Portugal. And by the end of September of 1571, they all realized we need to get after it. Why? When winter comes, the sea gets rough. And so the four chunks of this Holy League of fleets set out to look for the Muslim fleet, right? 'Cause no radar, no telescopes, what do you call these?
Periscope.
Periscope? I don't know. No fingers that help you see far. And I do love this. This is a quote directly from the article, right? Finally, they learned that an enormous Muslim fleet, nearly 100 ships larger than their own, was sailing near to land toward the Gulf of Lepanto. No more talking, Don Juan told his admirals. Now we fight. Quote, those who gazed on the massive array of ships and sails were filled with awe. One of those to be wounded in battle, the great author Cervantes, who wrote, quote, of the most noble and memorable event the past centuries have seen. 600 ships in two amazingly orderly lines, each stretching 3 miles from end to end, silently bore down on one another as the distance between them closed. A sense of destiny waited upon all who watched and waited. Okay. Holy crap, this is for all of the marbles. If the Christians lose here, there is nothing left. Right? There's literally nothing left. There's no army between the Ottomans and the other side of Europe. Okay. So what did the Holy League have? About 60,000 dudes, okay? 40,000 sailors or oarsmen. Again, they didn't use slaves to row. About 20,000 soldiers, okay? So they only had 20,000 soldiers here. 206 galleys and 6 of these huge galleys, okay? What did the Muslims have? 84,000 men, 13,000 sailors, 34,000 soldiers, 37,000 slaves, 222 galleys, and 56 of the huge ones. Okay. So the battle commences, and it was short. and it was violent. And what was the end? The Holy League lost 7,500 men and 13 ships. The Ottomans lost 25,000 soldiers. 117 galleys were captured, 20 large galleys were captured, and 50 were sunk. This was a slaughter. Outnumbered, not outgunned, well, outgunned in terms of volume by a very large degree, but Venetians had superior cannonballs. They did it, okay? And this is a miracle. And again, there's one article I found where someone, oh, it's not a miracle. Their ships were better and blah, blah, blah. This is a miracle. You're talking about 20,000 soldiers versus 34,000 soldiers, besides the 37 slaves they could throw into the fight as well. You're talking about a Christian army that was outnumbered by 100 ships. And remember, how did you fight? You rammed, right? Like Romans did a thing called a corvus, okay, where they tried this hundreds of years, well, almost, let me see, gosh, guys, 1,500 years before. What Romans did was put this big platform on their ships with a big tooth on it so that when they got close to the other ship, they could slam down into it. This is when they were fighting the Carthaginians, the Punic Wars. And that platform allowed them to send their infantry over to wipe out the sailors. Well, at this point, everybody had figured it out. So it was fighting hand to hand as these ships slammed into each other. This is from History Today, and I did like this, okay? The message arrived at King Philip II's home at 2 p.m. on the 31st of October, 1571. The message had traveled 3,500 kilometers at a rate of 150 kilometers a day, a record for that time. The king was at prayer in the chapel. It was All Souls Day. And on his orders, after he read the message, the choir immediately began to sing Te Deum. Philip's chief minister hailed it as the greatest naval victory since Pharaoh's army drowned in the Red Sea. 2 months later, Philip's son and heir was born, and the coincidence led him to pardon all prisoners in his jails and commission from Titian, the most famous painter of the day, a huge painting called The Offering of Philip II, which commemorated the birth of his son and the Battle of Lepanto. Okay. It really is amazing. A whole empire united in praying the rosary and begging our mother for a victory. And again, this was the kerfuffle on the internet last week because we can't ever celebrate anything. Well, all of those dead Muslims love Mary too. Of course they do. My God. And we're not celebrating that Mary went out and killed a bunch of Muslims. What we're celebrating is that an unjust aggressor was stopped before more innocents were slaughtered. That's what we're celebrating. It's been, at that point in history, a consistent pattern in Islam. That's a fact. I'm not ripping on Muslims. That's a fact, right? And Christians did the same thing. Yes. That's my point, right? That's not your point. That's mine. You know what I mean? Christians did it when we were the big kids on the block, and then the Muslims did it when they were, okay? Miguel Cervantes, someone pointed this out, was a guy who wrote Don Quixote, right? Was killed in that battle. Wounded in that battle and died shortly after. Over 15,000 Christians were liberated from slavery that day. Yeah, 15,000. So maybe I will do this in one show. Sweet. If so, I got backup for tomorrow. Don't worry. You've got a lot of people, again, this is what people do now. If Christians did something good, you have to quickly undermine it. And one thing I was surprised to find was there was a historian who was like, well, wasn't that? Yeah, it was a big victory, but the Christians didn't follow up, and they didn't, right? The Holy League fell apart immediately. Okay? There was still a Holy League, but it never was on the same page again. And had they had an ounce of brains or humility, they would have went and liberated Cyprus. They would have went and but they didn't. right? They had to pick at each other. And one of the Muslim caliphs, the way he described it to the Christians was, you cut off our beard, but we cut off your arm, my beard will grow back, right? And he was right, we humiliated them, but they genuinely damaged us by taking Cyprus. But why then are we still Christian if it wasn't a big deal? Well, that's the point, right? That it was a big deal. It was a big deal because we had no business winning that battle. It was a big deal because we prayed our tails off and God gave us a miracle. It was a big deal for a lot of reasons. So I'm going to quote some secular historians to help us put it in context, okay? It says, now this one is from Roger Crowley, who's a naval historian, quote, Lepanto led to a disengagement from imperial Mediterranean ambitions and created a permanent stalemate between the maritime empires. Okay? What's he saying? Well, his point is really simple. For the people who say, well, it was no big deal for the Muslims, well, then why didn't they come back? Right? And for the people who say it's no big deal for Christians, well, why did we get to keep Europe? Right? Basically, like any good fight, the Christians taught the Muslims, don't put your foot over here. Right? And the Muslims taught the Christians, all right, but you don't put your foot over here. And both sides did that. Both sides kept the peace. Why? That was a slaughter. You hear those numbers, and I want you to think of how few people were alive at that time. This was unbelievable amount of dead. Well, very few for the Christians, 7,500, right? Just shocking. Lepanto fixed the limits of two worlds. From this moment on, a diagonal frontier that ran the length of the sea from Istanbul to the gates of Gibraltar hardened, and the competitors turned their backs on each other. Basically, they didn't fight anymore. Why? Because this was a weapon. Okay? Christianity in Europe was saved by this, guys. They're really... So another thing it did was it broke, like, do any of you remember when Buster Douglas beat Mike Tyson? Do you remember this? And the odds were, I believe, 46-1 against him. Tyson, nobody lasted 3 rounds with the man. And Buster Douglas, a journeyman heavyweight, beat him. And then Tyson started to lose after that, right? That's because what the phrase in sports is the aura of invincibility. Like, I don't know, let's say Bama loses to Texas A&M. Wasn't that glorious? And that's the thing. The Turks could be beat. Europe could be saved. That's another huge consequence of this. A historian named Paul Davis put it this way, quote, this was more than a military victory. And again, this is a secular historian. This was a moral victory. For decades, the Ottoman Turks terrified Europe, and the victories of Solomon the Magnificent caused Europe serious concern. The defeat at Lepanto further exemplified the rapid deterioration of Ottoman might under Selim II, and Christians rejoiced at this setback. The mystique of Ottoman power was tarnished by the battle, and Christian Europe was hardened. Right? All of a sudden the Christians went, we can beat these guys. Nobody could beat them. We can beat them. And that was a big deal, because back then losing meant death, not oh shucks. Okay? What else? It did a huge amount of damage to the Ottoman Empire in this regard. They had an obscene amount of wealth. But building ships is expensive. And the, what do they call, Venetians, in their battle, between the battle the Venetians had at the fort and the battle at Lepanto, they lost their entire military leadership. The Ottomans did. All their leaders were dead. And now you had accounts I read of Ottomans actually joking about these ships being piloted, being run by young boys who didn't know what the heck they were doing. And building the ships and training the Navy was super expensive. And the Ottomans had to sit for a while, raise the money, build the ships. And for a while, somebody wrote this, their ships were green because they were using green wood. They had stripped the forest to build this huge Navy, and now they had to build another Navy right after. And they had these ships made of green wood. Isn't that funny? So, gosh, I did it in one show. I'm very, very impressed. I'm impressed with me.
So are we.
Yeah. Well, what kind of questions do you guys have? If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you. Would it be considered a sin for a Christian to pretend to be Muslim so they didn't get killed? Yeah. Yeah. To some extent, if that involves denying Jesus. You know? If you're talking trickery, sure. Yeah, you do you. But if part of that trickery involves renouncing Christ, you shouldn't do that. Yeah, no. You should be willing. Sorry, I don't make the rules. I just enforce them. I think I'm right. You know, I'll double check because there's people a lot smarter than me who know this stuff. Like, I don't know if you ever read the book Silence. Did you ever read the book Silence? Okay. So, I don't know if you know this. This is so weird. One of my degrees is in Japanese history. Okay. What can I say? It was a degree that got me a job with Japan and stuff. People were like, what were you thinking? I'm like, if I was thinking, I wouldn't have got it.
What were you thinking?
Well, truly, all kidding aside, this was the late 80s. And at this point, well, two things. First, I was just smitten. I started taking every Asian history class I could, but I truly focused on Japan. China confused me. Mongols made sense and Japanese made sense. So, and at the time, you may remember, this is the late 80s, Flint had just been kicked in the teeth by GM because it was a day that ended in Y. And they were bringing in a lot of what they called efficiency experts from Japan. And there was a Japanese cultural center right here in Flint at the time. And Toyota, of all things, was offering scholarships to go to Japan, and teach English. And what I knew was I could graduate, go to Japan and teach English for a year, and then come back and serve the Japanese embassy or Japanese cultural experts. Because for Japanese people, to be impolite is one of your worst sins. Again, Americans don't have anything like this. Like, if I was rude to Carrie by accident, as opposed to on purpose, and I say to Carrie, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. For us, that's kind of done, right? She either accepts or she doesn't. In Japan, an apology means something. I mean it. Like, you may remember there was, in the 80s as well, because of incompetence, an American airline crashed and killed a ton of Japanese people. And the head of the airlines said, quote, "We sincerely apologize to the people of Japan." All the lawsuits were dropped. It means something. Yeah. It's a culture where politeness is of epic importance. Subtlety is extremely important. It's hard to explain. When Japanese people came here, or when Americans went there for long term, there was usually a need for someone to sit down and tell them the rules. Because, and here's part of the politeness thing, the Japanese people won't. They won't tell you that's rude, because telling you it's rude would be rude. They'll just sit there horrified. You know, is this making sense?
Yes.
How did I get here?
About your degree. That's very interesting.
Oh, yeah. So there was a great future in it, and I have a buddy who had the degree who's still living in Japan, and frankly, making a ton of money.
So you could have done that?
Yeah, I could have been rolling in the cheese, in the yen. But why am I telling you this? There's a guy named Sushako Endo, who was a Catholic Japanese person. There's not many of them. And he wrote a lot of really groovy books. But his whole thing was Christianity will never work in Japan, right? He said Japan is a swamp a spiritual swamp. And the root of Christianity, gosh, I think I remember this. It's been like 40 years. The root of Christianity will never really take hold here. And there's a lot of reasons for that I don't agree with. I mean, Jesus will win. I believe that. But I get what he's saying. I think he despaired. I do. As a Japanese Catholic, I think he despaired. But he wrote a book called Silence. Okay? How are we doing? Do you mind if I talk for a bit? Okay, folks, I'm sorry. I'm going to go over. But this book blew me away. I read it in college. And it's a long, because it's Japanese, right? So every detail is excruciatingly laid out, right? Like I read the book Runaway Horses by, I think it was Yukio Mishima. And that book was this thick, and it like described a few years. You're like, my God. He spends a paragraph describing a button. Seriously, like to them, detail is so important. Do you see how we bump into them? Yeah, we're opposites. And we're lovely. I don't rip on America. They're lovely, we're lovely, but we are opposites. So anyway, Sashako Endo wrote this book about when Christianity came to Japan, and it was in the 1600s. And at that point, Japan was under the leadership of the Tokugawa Bakufu, okay? And Bakufu is a military government, or it means literally, I think it means tent government. But it was the longest running military government that I know of in the world. And under a guy named Ieyasu Tokugawa, want to hear something crazy? He defeated Toyotomi Hideyoshi at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1601. I know this. Miho. So Tokugawa Ieyasu, one of the things that they ran into is these akabuses, these Dutch guns. And in the end, I'm talking too much, he decided no Westerners in Europe. And what was the prototypical Western thing? Christianity. So Dutch Jesuit missionaries were of the habit of sneaking into Japan and winning tons of converts. I mean, tons. And the Japanese government learned right away torturing or executing them doesn't work. They don't care, right? They're willing to die for their faith, which was a goofy thing to them. They really thought that was crazy. But then they came up with something really insidiously genius. How are people doing? Are they bored silly?
No,
okay. They came up with what I think is the best way to fight Christianity. If you're a government and you don't want Christianity to take root, do this. So let's say I'm the Jesuit and I came here and converted Carrie and Dad. Okay? So any other government would kill me, put me in jail. No, not them. Here's what they would do. They would give me a very nice home, lock and key. I had guards with me at all times, so I couldn't go anywhere I didn't. Feed me like a king, keep me comfortable, and then every day watch them torture Carrie and Dad until one of them would renounce their faith. So let's say, Carrie, if you don't mind, you renounce your faith. I'm not Catholic anymore. And how would you renounce it? They would put a picture of the Blessed Mother on the ground called a fume, and they would tell you, step on it and spit on it. Okay, and if you did that, okay, Carrie, you're free. Now, what if Carrie did it? She stepped on the Blessed Mother and spit on a crucifix. Well, then they would turn to me and say, we're going to kill her now unless you renounce your faith. And you know she'll go to hell. She just renounced her faith. Isn't this messed up? Yeah. They were the masters of torture, and they came up with insidious, genius, and horrid ways to torture the people who surrendered their faith while making the ones who wouldn't watch and say, if you renounce your faith, we'll quit torturing them. We won't make you die for your faith. We'll make them die for your faith. It was genius, and it worked. The Jesuits never came back. Okay? Here's the key. The book Silence. Are people bored?
No.
Okay, in the book Silence, this priest who goes to Japan, God stops speaking to him. And he's lost, and he's in this foreign country, and it's a long story, but in the end, he's presented with this thing. We're going to keep torturing these people unless you step on the fume. And that in his book, what he wrote was he heard the voice of God speak to him for the first time in years and say to him, step on me. I came into this world, I can't believe I remember this, to be trampled on to save men. Trample on me. It was a powerful book, I think. And it's led to a ton of debates about should the priest have done it, because in the book he did. It said, that's the last line of that chapter. I'll never forget this. I read it in 1989. He placed his foot on the image and the cock crowed 3 times. Right? So that's one of those things where it's tough, isn't it? You know, when you say, is it okay to pretend to be a Muslim so I don't get killed? I don't think you're supposed to deny Jesus, but I get what the guy in the book did. I guess I just talked to you for way too long just to give you an insight into that question as I see it. I think you got to pray for wisdom and guidance. I would think the highest good is to die, being candid. And surrender your faith in God or we kill you. Get out your sword, chief, your gun, whatever you got, let's do this, right? You may remember, gosh, just a few years ago, when ISIS was burning through the Middle East and killing every Christian in sight. Like, do you guys get that Christianity is done in the Middle East for the first time? I mean, it's done. There's almost no one left. ISIS killed everyone. And our news didn't cover it because it was just Christians getting killed. But you may remember ISIS released a video that they thought would scare Christians. And it's so funny, people don't get how we think, right? Where they caught 10 Coptic Christians, Egyptians, lined them up on a beach, held a sword to their head and said, will you submit? And they said no. And every one of them was beheaded screaming Jesus' name. How cool is that? That, you know, for us Christians, we're like, okay, right? You get to blow past perk, just so you know. So it's, okay. How close to the book was the movie Silence? I think Scorsese did a good job, and I know a lot of people ripped on him because one of the problems I think Christians have in media is if someone doesn't do it perfect, we get offended. But I think he did a nice job, but it was different than the book. I mean, he really caught the whole thing of like, as I remember, I only saw it once. What stood out to me from the book was how many, it's so hard to explain. It's really, I don't mean to be funny, it's a complicated book. And I don't know how well a movie can capture all the beautiful and sad thoughts in that wonderful priest's head. He was just trying to be holy, right? And he wasn't humble, and that really was the problem to some extent, but he became humble. Which is God's goal, I think, for all of us. I think that was Scorsese. And Scorsese did it as a Catholic who goes to church. And I don't know. Anyway. Didn't one of the ISIS guards convert to Christianity in the middle of the beheadings? Yeah, I know that happened a couple times during ISIS's terror run, that when they saw how brave these guys were, and frankly, there are a majority of Muslims found ISIS horrifying. A vast majority of them. You got to remember, there's 1 billion of them. And we're talking about, when we talk about ISIS, you aren't talking about 40,000. That's not I don't know what percentage that is. And I never met a Muslim who didn't find them horrifying. So I sometimes think I need to be more careful, but other times I think we're so careful we lose the ability to learn. Right? And I think, I know, I've been very candid about Christians' historical sins. Almost embarrassingly so. So I guess, yeah. Okay, I have kept you way too long. I am so sorry, but not really. And then tomorrow, I guess it's up to you. I mean, I was going to do parables. Yeah? You guys want some more parables? I think they're awesome. Okay. So we're going to get after parables tomorrow. I've got a bunch of them ready. Okay? And, congratulations to, let me think this through, fans of the Red Sox, the Astros, the Braves. I think those are the only 3 set teams, okay? And condolences to the White Sox. You represented our conference well. What do you do? Houston's a freight train.
The Braves lost, or what?
The Braves beat the Brewers. I know, it made me cry. They eliminated the Brewers. And I was rooting for the Brewers and the White Sox just because they're Midwest. Neither of them are these billion-dollar teams. And anyway, so congratulations to those teams. And my fellow Tiger fans, we'll get there. I'm serious. We are right on the edge. But guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for caring about this stuff. You don't know how much it means to me that we get to meet like this and that you care, honestly. I could go on. I'll shut up. So let's say a prayer, and we'll get after it tomorrow when we look at the parables. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Oh, Jesus, thank you for the prayers of your Blessed Mother, who united people who did not want to be united. Thank you for the 7,500 who gave up their life at Lepanto defending Christianity. Lord, we pray for all of those who hate Christianity. And we pray for all of those Christians who hate. May we, by your grace, learn to live in peace and pursue the truth without rancor, but in a spirit of faith and hope and love. For all the discord that we cause personally and collectively, Lord Jesus, please forgive us. For the victims of Catholic crimes, if I may, oh Jesus, heal their broken hearts. And Father, there are so many people that we worry about, and there's so many situations that we fret about, and we don't know what to do except worry. So we're going to stop worrying and give them all to you, because we love you and we trust you. And may Almighty God bless all of you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I will see you beautiful people tomorrow when we talk about the parables. Peace. Is it over?
No, it's never over.